of England was formed for the first time the year 1717. There were individual lodges existing in many parts of England and Scotland before 1717. For some unknown reason, 4 lodges got together and formed a Grand Lodge of England, or rather Grand Lodge at London, Westminster City, to meet on a very regular basis in the year 1717 only. By about another 15-20 years, there was a lot of dissension, dispute, disagreements, and a rival group of lodges were formed, which did not owe any allegiance to this Grand Lodge, which was formed in the year 1717. And those rival lodges got together and formed their own Grand Lodge called as the Grand Lodge according to the ancient institutions. The one which is formed later is called the Grand Lodge according to the ancient institutions. So a rival Grand Lodge was there, somewhere around 1760s. The 1717 Grand Lodge and the rival Grand Lodge of 1760 together united in the year 1813, forming the United Grand Lodge of England, which exists even today. United Grand Lodge of England. Why I say this is, the Grand Lodge of Ancients, the rival Grand Lodge formed in the year 1760s approximately, did not have a form of advancing to the east by any specific steps, 3, 5 or 7. They just walked up from the senior warden up to the altar and took the obligation. In fact, the Grand Secretary of the Ancients very derogatively dismissed the moderns' method of advancing to the west to east by very sarcastic comments. He did not look upon that with favor at all. And it must be noted that this Grand Lodge of Ancients practiced Freemasonry in a more pure form, in a more uncorrupt, and many other innovations also. Whatever, for historical reasons, this method of advancing from the west to east has been practiced by only the moderns, but not by the ancients. And when the union took place, it was all a question of compromise. How much of the ancients' ritual to retain, how much of the moderns' ritual to retain. And it so happened that this funny mode of advancing from the west to east became canonical law, established into the new ritual, which we practice even today. But those steps honestly do not have very much of significance. They did not have any original symbolism. Whatever symbolism you give it to it now is something which is contrived, which we have tried to imagine and say this is how we explain, we go up a winding staircase or we go across a grave or whatever. But they were not originally intended symbolism of the original framers of Masonic ritual. It is a matter of compromise, something like that. Another question, brother? Yep.
Companion is mentioned twice. I'm not explaining to you where it comes because we have a second Indian name. Rest everywhere it is mentioned as brother.
We could argue that issue in a very different way, whether companion means a Royal Arch companion or it means just a friend standing next to me, my companion. And both words are the same, the meaning is the same. How exactly the compiler meant? Was there a strand of Royal Arch masonry within the craft? That's what you are asking, which is a very big subject for debate. I don't think we should go into it now. First degree? Sackcloth. Okay, okay. Okay. I was talking about the left leg and left knee and all that. And initially, I'll come to that also. I'll come to that, yes. Initially, as I told you, there were only 2 degrees in Freemasonry. And probably there was not a special cloth to wear. Only your dress was rearranged in some fashion. Your trousers rolled up to expose your knee. Your shirt was tucked away inside to expose your breast. You don't have to wear a sackcloth as such. I just made a quotation from the Bible to establish the validity of the cable tow as a symbol of humility. A sackcloth is not a requirement of Masonic clothing. We want the knee made bare. We want the heart exposed. We want one arm made bare. We want it to be slipshod. Why? This again is a matter of, again, conjecture. Nobody has written down what exactly was meant. So it's only guesswork. And let us start by understanding the path of circumambulation or perambulation which we undertake within the temple. It's always from the right to left in a clockwise direction. And even the officers, when the masters and wardens enter their pedestal and take their chairs, they do so in a clockwise fashion. For the simple reason that clockwise or east to west by the right is considered auspicious. Why is this considered auspicious? How did the tradition come about? Is a long story. It is auspicious, you can take it for granted, across different cultures. The English, rather the Druids in England practice the same form of circumambulation. Hindus in India practiced. The Christian churches, they do it. The Egyptians do it. Circumambulation, perambulation is always clockwise, right to left, and stepping off with the right leg is considered auspicious. I'll again repeat that, stepping off with the right leg is considered auspicious. Why is the initiate asked to step off with the left foot? A tough question to answer. Again, no answers anywhere, mere guesswork. Guesswork is perhaps because, one, the instruction came from members of the uniformed services who were in the lodges. Members of the uniformed services who were in the lodges. Those who wear a uniform, who wear a sidearm, would wear the sidearm on the left side, be it a pistol or a rifle or a sword, is worn on the left side. And if you are going to step off with your right foot and start marching the right foot first, you're going to be slightly unbalanced. It made sense to start marching with the left foot first to counteract the weight of your sidearms. Perhaps that was a tradition which was taught to these initiates who were asked to go around the lodge. Perhaps, we don't know. Perhaps it was just a mechanism to ensure that both the deacon and the candidate walked in step together so they don't trip over each other. It makes sense. If if the deacon is walking with his right foot first and the candidate is going to go with his left foot first, it's going to be a little difficult when they are so close to each other. Their feet are going to trip with each other. Whereas if we have got the same foot coming forward, it's easier to walk. Perhaps that might have been one reason. But again, all this is guesswork. And whether the person who made this guesswork, it's not me, the person who made this guesswork is correct or not, we can again keep on arguing. Same thing with your kneeling on the left knee for the first degree, kneeling on the right knee for the second degree, kneeling on both knees for the third degree. This again is a matter which is debatable, but generally the right side is considered the stronger part of the body. The left side is considered the weaker part of the body. Perhaps the devisers of the ritual wanted to make sure that when you took your last final obligation as a Mason, you did it on your right knee. And therefore, by default, the first degree had to be on your left knee. This is again very contrived guesswork. Nobody has got the right answer. Why slipshod? It could be an emblem of your poverty, distress, and humility. There is a section of ritual lectures, as it is called, which says, "What are you wearing?" the candidate is asked, and the candidate replies, "An old shoe of my mother's." The slipshod candidate answers, "An old shoe of my mother's." An old shoe of his mother-lodge. A tattered shoe on one of his foot given to him by his mother-lodge. Why is he wearing it? To show that he is in a state of poverty and distress. Metals deprived, even his shoes removed. He has got a sackcloth. He is coming with all humility, seeking to be admitted to the mysteries and privileges of Freemasonry. So that is perhaps one reason why the candidate is slipshod. That doesn't explain why slipshod of the left leg, why slipshod of the right leg, and why both legs slipshod. This probably indicates somebody's attempt at progression. First degree, let us have the left leg slipshod. Second degree, let us have both legs slipshod. Third degree, let's have second degree have the right leg slipshod. Third degree have both legs slipshod. This is an idea of progression, trying to show a variation between the 3 degrees for the candidate, to show some amount of interest, some amount of curiosity, not some big rocket science. Nothing very great about this. Just a distinction between 2 different degrees. But then again, taking off the shoe is again has a biblical reference as a sign of humility, a sign of contract, a sign of agreement, a promise, a pledge, an obligation. The book of Ruth, there is an episode which I won't explain straight at length now, I think we're running out of time, but where a gentleman, Boaz, takes off his shoe and offers it as a sign of his contract to buy all the properties of a young lady whom he is going to adopt. So, at the time of buying the property, he takes off his shoe and offers it to the counterpart from whom he is buying it, as a mark of his good faith, as a sign of a binding contract, as it were. Likewise, a candidate would be entering a lodge with a shoe slipshod as a sign of his contract to be a good Mason, a binding obligation, as it were, a sign that he will respect the obligation he has entered into, and so on and so forth. You could keep on explaining that, but this might have been one of the other reasons why the slipshod was devised into a ritual. No metals in your pocket, of course, shows you your poverty. It also reminds you that King Solomon's temple was built without any metal tools at the place of construction. Jewish law says all metal is polluting. Jewish law says all metal is polluting. Therefore, when the temple was constructed, it was constructed by only hand tools without using any